Our issue segment tonight, a new report says one of the world's leading sources of climate data knowingly exaggerated the effects of global warming in a landmark paper, a paper that was timed, coincidentally, to influence the historic Paris Agreement on climate change. According to a high-level whistleblower, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration violated its own rules by publishing this report with dubious scientific claims. With me now to dive into it more deeply, contributor to the National Review for Food, Science, and Agriculture, Julie Kelly. Julie, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Liz.
Julie, this is quite a story. This is, I used this earlier on Twitter. This is insane. It should be a bombshell story. Not too many people are covering it here, but let's go through the details. So the Mail on Sunday reported that it's called a pause buster paper. That's what the paper's called. Actually exaggerated global warming data, even though they presented it as if it were scientific fact.
Right. Well, that's just one part of the story. So the whistleblower who stepped forward is a top scientist at NOAA. I mean, he's not, sweeping the floors. He was in charge of the climate data for over 10 years. And what apparently happened, and this is what it will come out in the investigation, is whether this paper was politically timed, how they corrected the data, which is actually a word that was used by the paper's author, to change sea surface temperatures to reflect that the pause in global warming, which had been identified by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, it was really to debunk the pause that they had admitted and acknowledged in their report in 2013. And so that's how this all started.
Right, and just so we're clear here, this whistleblower from NOAA, his name is Dr. John Bates. He was actually awarded a gold medal by President Obama for his scientific achievements here. So you're right, he certainly has the scientific credibility to be this whistleblower. He knows what he's talking about in that sense. But part of the political scandal here, and I mean, it goes a little bit above just political bickering here, but he's basically alleging that this paper was rushed to publication in order to influence the Paris climate change conference.
Well, because this 2013 report, the IPCC, had the pause it acknowledged in the report, and then you had this huge Paris climate conference happening in November of 2015. This report was published in Science magazine in June of 2015. So then everyone could kind of breathe a sigh of relief, because a lot of people were saying, well, wait, if global warming has paused, this is the entire reason you're having this conference, to obligate taxpayers to pay hundreds of billions of dollars to mitigate global warming. And for 15 years, it really hasn't happened. So, here to the rescue comes this paper. It's widely published throughout the world, every media outlet. And so then they could move forward with a conference without worrying about having to address this issue of the global warming pause.
Right, it reinserts the urgency into needing that money to address global warming, because I think not only did the paper claim that this pause in global warming never existed, but it said that world temperatures have been steadily rising faster than scientists originally predicted. So like I said, it puts that panic back into the measure here. But let's get into the nitty-gritty just a little bit here, because I know my viewers like to know the facts that go into this stuff, not just the surface headlines. This paper, the Pause Buster paper, was based off of two new temperature sets of data, the measurement of the planet's surface and the measurement of the sea's surface, the temperature of that. But both data sets apparently were flawed.
Well, this really goes to the sea surface temperature. Now, this is really an interesting point, and I really do urge all of your viewers either look at my article on National Review Online or some of the other conservative publications. Of course, the media is excusing this all the way. But how they measured it, they used to measure it, they would take in seawater. They called it ship intake. So they would take in seawater through the engine, through to the ship, and then measure it that way. Well, it was warmer, obviously. So then in the late 90s, early 2000s, they started using buoys. And so the buoys had much more accurate kind of readings about the seawater, the temperature, the readings. And so they adjusted the buoy readings, really basically warming them up. And they actually refer to it as a cold bias in the buoy readings. Now, if you're taking seawater in a buoy and the data goes up to a satellite apparently, and you read it, how is there a cold bias? It's sea surface temperature. I mean, it just kind of defies any logic.
Right.
And in typical scientific form, they keep trying to over-explain it, but the common sense of it is, well, the temperature is what it is. Why are you correcting data, which is the word that, as I said, the paper's author himself used.
Right, and cold bias. I mean, the only bias that it seems to me, any common sense would dictate here, the only bias here is the fact that it doesn't match up with the agenda, it doesn't match up with the result that they're trying to achieve, which, by the way,
Right.
is not the idea of science here. The idea of science is to investigate, to see what conclusion your data gives you, not to see if you can possibly finagle a way to provide the conclusion that you want. Julie, there are more issues with the data here, too, because, and you can explain this better than I can, but part of the protocol here is to archive the data, to keep track of this so that you know, so that everyone knows, the scientific community that comes after you knows how you achieved your conclusions based off of the data that you had. None of this data was archived.
That's one of the really shocking allegations that Dr. Bates makes, that the data was not archived. And surprise, the computer crashed at NOAA that processed the software that registered all of this data. Now, if that isn't the most Obama-esque thing that you've heard. But listen, Liz, this investigation goes back to 2015. The House Science Committee started looking into this paper right away. And so this whistleblower, to his credit, he's very courageous, really has reinforced some of the issues that Congress has already been looking at. But I'll tell you what, the way that the science community and science media has handled this is outrageous. Within 48 hours, you had the head of one of the top scientific associations in this country really poo-pooing the whole incident, calling it an internal dispute, saying there's no scandal here. They haven't had time to look at one allegation. They are already smearing Dr. Bates. They are already in full cover-up mode. And this is why the scientific community, people really need to see what's going on here. Because I'll tell you, it really goes a long way to destroying their credibility as a whole, the way that they've even handled this incident this week.
Right, it kind of besmirches the name of science here. It makes the idea of us looking like, especially those of us who aren't in the scientific community, we want to be able to trust the data, we want to be able to trust the conclusions. But to me, from the outside, it just looks like it's becoming an arm, of the Progressive Party. It's becoming an activist organization, not a scientific community. Julie, thank you so much for writing about this. Thank you for coming on the show and talking about it. Keep us updated because this is just beginning to unfold.